Why is it that even though the United States is the world's largest oil producer, it still can't fully use its own oil? It's a lot like a farmer growing crops on his own land, yet when it comes time to use them, he has to beg someone else for permission. The world we live in often shows one reality up front, but the truth behind the scenes is entirely different. Similarly, millions of containers arrive in the US from China every year. But why does America throw some of them into massive scrap heaps? And how does an Iranian Boeing 777 seemingly smuggle its way across the globe? Today, in this episode, on the world's oceans, hundreds of thousands of cargo ships are constantly moving. These ships carry the backbone of our global economy. Almost 90% of the world's trade passes through them. On top of each ship sit thousands of metal boxes. The clothes you wear, the mobile phone in your hand, chances are they were all inside these containers at some point. From a distance, it may look like a perfectly organized system. Containers go out full, come back empty. Over the past few decades, China has become the factory of the world. With massive exports and limited imports, it has built a huge trade empire. But when containers arrive in Europe or US ports, the real problems begin. Across Europe, profits from trade are far lower than in China. In the US, the picture is even more complicated. The world's largest consumer imports a huge amount of goods but exports very little. As a result, 40% of the containers arriving from China are filled with products and then return home. But what about the remaining 60%? Not all of them come back empty, because sending an empty container costs money. Shipping an empty box back to China can cost around $3,000 and takes up valuable space on the ship. Meanwhile, a full container could easily generate tens of thousands of dollars. In fact, China can manufacture a new container for just $2,000, so they don't feel the need to return the old ones. The result? Every year, many new containers are produced. Meanwhile, old containers sit rusting in ports and cities. Some are repurposed into cheap warehouses or small homes, others melted down for steel. Yet, a large portion simply remains unused. These rusting piles of metal are a silent signature of the imbalance in global trade. On the other side of the globe lies the mystery of American oil. The U.S. now produces more oil than any other country, yet it cannot fully use its own oil. The first reason is the nature of the oil itself. U.S. oil is light and thin, what's called light crude. But most refineries in the country were built for processing heavier, thicker oil. At one time, America imported thick oil from Mexico and Venezuela, and its machinery was built accordingly. Updating refineries to process light oil would cost over $200 billion, a massive investment that can't happen overnight. As a result, the U.S. often sells light oil abroad at high prices and imports heavier oil at a lower cost. The second reason is infrastructure. There aren't enough pipelines to connect the oil fields where production occurs to the refineries that need it. For example, Texas produces enormous amounts of oil, but there aren't enough pipelines to send it to refineries on the East Coast. California faces similar problems, with nearly 70% of its fuel still imported. So even though the oil is under their own land, it can't reach the places that need it. Now, if we shift our focus to the politics of sanctions and embargoes, another dramatic story emerges. Iran has long been under strict U.S. sanctions. They cannot buy or sell with the U.S. or its allies. Yet, we see Iranian airlines operating American Boeing and European Airbus planes. How is this possible? The story is as thrilling as a blockbuster film. Between 2024 to 25, 5 Boeing 777 planes suddenly ended up in Iran. These planes originally belonged to Singapore Airlines and had been abandoned in Australia for years. Iran couldn't buy them directly because of sanctions. First, a US-based company purchased the planes. Then, paperwork falsely registered them under companies in Madagascar and Cambodia, companies that didn't even exist, just to bypass the sanctions. When the planes were sold under Madagascar's name, they moved beyond US regulatory oversight. Under the pretext of maintenance, pilots filed flight plans to Kenya, and as the planes entered Afghan airspace, their transponders were turned off, disappearing from radar. Ultimately, they reached various airports in Iran and merged into the fleet of Iran's Great Air. Legally, the U.S. could do nothing because Iran's name wasn't on any paperwork. Everything had gone through third parties. These events remind us how uncertain the global economy truly is. Decisions made far away affect our daily lives every day. So next time you hear about rising oil prices or product shortages, remember, the reality behind the scenes is shaped by ships, laws, and a web of geopolitics.